We do have an outstanding evening here this evening. Vivek Ramaswamy is an American business leader, New York Times best-selling author, and former top 2024 Republican U.S. presidential candidate. He's become a leading voice on practical solutions and using existing legal authority to secure the border and to end birthright citizenship for children of illegal immigrants. Folks, I'm going to ask you for your attention here as we are introducing a key speaker here this evening. So if we could have your attention. Born and raised in Cincinnati, Ohio, he often recounts the sage advice from his father: if you're going to stand out, then you might as well be outstanding. This set the course for his life. A nationally ranked tennis player and valedictorian at his high school, St. Xavier, home of the Bombers. He went on to graduate summa cum laude in biology from Harvard and received a JD from Yale Law School while working at a hedge fund. He then started a biotech company, Roivant Sciences, where he oversaw the development of drugs that went on to become FDA approved. Quite a few drugs, 5 as a matter of fact. In 2022, he founded Strive, an Ohio-based asset management firm that directly competes with asset managers like BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard, and others who use the money of everyday citizens to advance environmental and social agendas with many citizens and capital owners. Vivek is married to Apurva, a throat surgeon and assistant professor at the James Cancer Hospital at Ohio State University. They live in Columbus, Ohio, where they're raising 2 sons. We are very proud to have with us this evening Vivek Ramaswamy.
Love you guys. It's great to be here. It's good to be back in Pennsylvania. I'll get right into it and cut through the polite introductions. I'm going to get to the heart of where we are right now. We're in the middle of a war in this country. It is not a war between black and white, as the media would have you believe. It is not a war even between Democrat and Republican, not really. It is deeper than that. It is a war between those of us who love the United States of America and our founding ideals and a fringe minority who hates this country and what we stand for. It is a war between the managerial class and the everyday citizen. It goes beyond partisan lines. I actually went to Rome a couple weeks ago, met with European leaders. I can tell you something going on in the West right now. It is a war between the Great Reset and the Great Uprising that says hell no to that vision. That's what this is about. And I think that you got to know you're in a war to win one. I don't use that word lightly. War is one of these things that can speak itself into existence. Our founding fathers understood that 250 years ago. You can only win a war if you understand that you're in one. And I call it a war because there's no middle ground here. Either you believe in merit or you believe in group quotas. You can't have both. Either you believe in free speech or you believe in censorship. You cannot have both. Either you believe in American exceptionalism or you believe in apologizing for who we are. You cannot have both of these things at the same time. Right now, more than ever, we need a commander-in-chief who is going to lead us to victory in that war. And this year, that man is going to be Donald J. Trump, the 47th president of the United States of America. But it is not going to be just one man who comes from on high or some politician from Congress who comes down to save us. If we are going to be saved as a nation, it is going to be because we save ourselves. And that's what today is really about. Looking ourselves in the mirror and asking ourselves, What does it mean to be an American? What does it mean to make a sacrifice for this country? Look into our founding fathers in 1776, many of whom were well off, 56 men who signed the Declaration of Independence, pledging their lives, their honor, and their treasure for this country. The question for us is, what are we going to do for the country that we inhabit today? What does it even mean to be an American? We've lost our sense of our national identity in this country. You know, we as conservatives, we've fallen into this habit. I see it happening. I saw it in 2022. It's why we had the red wave that never came. And I want to make sure we don't make that mistake again this year. We can't just fall into the trap of criticizing the other side's endless policy failures and defining ourselves that way. We have to define, what do we actually stand for? What does it mean to be a Republican? What does it mean to be a conservative? What does it mean to be an American in the year 2024? And to me, it means we believe in those ideals of 1776. Ideals like merit and the pursuit of excellence, that you get ahead in this country, not on the color of your skin, but on the content of your character and your contributions. That's why we're against affirmative action and the DEI agenda and the racial equity audits and quota systems in this country. That's why we're going to end affirmative action. It has been a cancer on our American soul, and we are done with it. It means we believe in the rule of law in this country. Thank you. And I say this as the kid of legal immigrants to this country. That means your first act of entering this country cannot break the law. And that is why we will use our own military to secure our own southern border and our northern border too. That's what it means to stand for the rule of law in the United States of America. Stop using our taxpayer money to fund Central American countries that are failing to solve the border crisis at each of those borders, all the way from Venezuela to the southern border of Texas. Stop using our own federal money to fund sanctuary cities that are paying for the breakage of the rule of law. End birthright citizenship for the kids of illegals in this country, because it does not apply to them. And if you're in this country illegally, you ought to be returned to your country of origin. That's what it means to stand for the rule of law in the United States of America. It means the people who we elect to run the government ought to be the ones who actually run the government. Not the shadow government in the deep state that's running the show today. You want to get serious about actually draining the swamp, you can't just tinker around with these agencies anymore. We've tried that. Doesn't work. You want to get serious about actually reviving our constitutional republic, what our founding fathers set into motion. 3 branches of government, not 4. That means you got to get in there and be willing to shut down these agencies one at a time. Department of Education, ATF. You go straight down the list. Arguably, you could say the FBI, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. You can't just reform these agencies. You got to be prepared to shut them down, fire 75% of those civil servants. If the president can't work for us for more than 8 years, neither should most of those civil servants either. That's how you actually get serious about draining the swamp. These aren't black ideas or white ideas. See, that's the thing. These aren't even really Democrat ideas or Republican ideas. They shouldn't be. These are American ideals that we fought a revolution to secure 250 years ago. And the question for us right now in this country is, do we actually believe those ideals still exist? Like, do we actually believe this is our 1776 moment? I said that the entire time running for U.S. president. 2024 is our 1776 moment. What does that mean? Means we have to revive the spirit of our founding. To make America great again, we got to remember what made America great the first time around. We got to understand our history rather than to be ashamed of it. Revive that founding spirit. See, I'm 38 years old, and I say this as a relatively young person in politics. I'm the youngest person ever to run for U.S. president as a Republican. People say that was too young to be president, and maybe there's some merit in that. But Thomas Jefferson, I'll start with him. He was 33 years old when he signed that Declaration of Independence. He was one of those 56 men who pledged his honor, his life as his treasure. 33 years old when he signed that declaration. He invented the swivel chair while he was at it, believe it or not. Thomas Jefferson. He actually was a wild inventor. He invented the polygraph test, that's the lie detector test that we use today. The first prototype of that was actually invented by Thomas Jefferson. He wasn't the only one. Benjamin Franklin, also a co-signer of that document, invented the lightning rod, the Franklin stove. Believe it or not, it was one of the major advances in thermodynamics in its day. And remedy to the common cold, invented by Benjamin Franklin. The bifocal spectacle. It wasn't just Jefferson. It wasn't just Franklin. All of these guys. There was something in the water back then. Robert Livingston, he was an ambassador to France. Part-time, just on the side, as his side gig, he invents, along with Robert Fulton, the steamship, one of the key components of the Industrial Revolution. Roger Sherman, not trained as an attorney, but ended up practicing law as a self-taught autodidact and then joined the board. Actually, I think it was of Yale that he eventually became part of the governing body of Yale to make sure kids could get an education that he wasn't able to get even though he taught himself. Alexander Hamilton, people know his story much better. He was, even younger than Thomas Jefferson. I'm 38, he was 33. He was in his early 20s at the time he fought in the American Revolution. These are the kinds of people who are our founding fathers. That spirit of excellence in our country that we know, that gave me the American dream, that has allowed me to live the life that I have, the kid of legal immigrants to this country who came here with no money. In a single generation, I've gone on to found multi-billion-dollar companies, doing it while marrying my wife, Apurva, who is a throat surgeon, saving lives every day, including today. That's where she was herself, the kid of immigrants who came to this country with no money. That is the American dream that our founding fathers set into motion. And I will not be part of a generation, none of us will, that squanders the sacrifices that they made. We often hear the good stories of our founding fathers. Sometimes it's worth pausing and remembering what actually happened to them. There were 56 men who signed the Declaration of Independence. How did they do? What came of it? They pledged their honor, their lives, and their treasure. 5 of them were captured by the British, tortured before they died. 12 of them had their homes ransacked, burned down. 2 of them had their own kids die in the Revolutionary War. 9 of them themselves died, either directly in the Revolutionary War or as of the physical consequences of it. These were the people who set our country into motion. Now, they didn't have to do this because they had no other choice. Many of them were landowners. Many of them were merchants, farmers, successful people who could have lived good lives for themselves if it weren't for a country that was going to outlive them. So I say again, what does it mean to say we're in a 1776 moment now? It's easy to say, it's harder to live out. Imagine facing down our founding fathers, those 56 men, Thomas Jefferson, George Washington, Alexander Hamilton, John Jay, the people who made the sacrifices to give us what we enjoy today. We meet them in the afterlife. They look us in the eye and ask us, tell us the sacrifices that they made. And then look you in the eye and say, what sacrifice did you make to pass that country on to your kids? And when we get there, we better have a damn good answer ready for the sacrifices that we made for our country. And that's what's at stake this year. This isn't one of those ordinary elections where it's about increasing the corporate tax rate or decreasing it 1% here or there. This isn't one of those elections. This is one of those elections where the future existence of our country is on the line. This is one of those elections where if my kids are in high school, one is 4 years old, one is soon to be 2 later this year. Interesting period to run for president, I'd say. But I did it for a reason, is if those 2 boys are in high school before we get this right, I don't think we have a country left. That's the time we're working with right now. So I bring it back to the beginning. I don't say it lightly. We are in the middle of a war for the future existence of the United States of America, and victory is our only option. And we might not like how we get there. To be sure, in this country, we need to fix the way we run elections in the United States of America. This shouldn't be controversial that we need single-day voting on Election Day as a national holiday with paper ballots, government-issued voter ID to match the voter file. And yes, English as the sole language that appears on a ballot. That's not controversial, that's not racist, that's not xenophobic, that's unifying in this country. Yes, we got to get to the promised land. We're not there yet. It means we need to do what's required to compete to win within the bounds of the law, because victory is our only option this year, including in a state like Pennsylvania. That's why I'm here today, to deliver that message. We don't love to have to do the things that we need to do with early voting or otherwise, but we can't actually fix the system until we win within the system. That's what our founding fathers would remind us of. They didn't love the constraints they fought the Revolutionary War with. They were outgunned and outmanned by the British. They put the Second Amendment in the Constitution for a reason. They came for the guns first, but they played from a disadvantage. But they did what they needed to do to win that war. And we have a war to win right now in this country. That's where we are. I'm asking every one of you to pledge your own honor, your sacrifice, your honor for your honor, your treasure, and your lives. Well, you know what? You may laugh at that, may not come to that. If we're not willing to actually devote our time and our resources, pretty soon I think it will come to making the same pledge that our founding fathers did too. What can we do? Starting with young people. I met a bunch of you heading into this event who are college Republicans, excited. I'm glad you're here at this event. I'll tell you, there's a culture of fear that's spread across this country. There you are. And it's going to fall on your shoulders in the next generation. It doesn't come easy. You know what? Actually, funny thing is about being 19 or 20 years old is you want to stick it to the man. You want to stand up to the system. You want to be heterodox. You want to, be a hippie. Okay, fine. 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, that was by talking about systemic racism and white rage and climate change or whatever. Right? Well, what began as a challenge to the system has now become the new system. For the college students here, you want to be heterodox, you want to stand up and stick it to the man, you want to be countercultural, show up on your college campus and say, you know what, I'm a conservative, I'm proud of it, I'm going to get married, have children, I'm proud and patriotic, and pledge allegiance to the United States of America. And that we're one nation under God. It's not a four-letter word. See, I think we live in a moment where the way we conquer this culture of fear, it's going to require every one of us to speak the truth in the open. You want to know the best measure of the health of American democracy since our founding to today? What's the best litmus test for how our democracy is doing? Turn on MSNBC on a given day. They'll be talking about the health of our democracy, threats to our democracy. What is our democracy? What is a threat to our democracy? What's a litmus test for the health of our democracy? Let's talk about it. Is it the number of ballots cast every November? Is it the number of green pieces of paper in our bank account? You can say these things are important, but it's not the most important thing. The best measure of the health of our democracy is the percentage of people who feel free to say what they actually think in public. Right now, we're doing poorly. Doesn't have to stay that way. When you are the only person in a room who believes what you do, maybe it's a school board meeting, maybe it's a parent-teacher conference, maybe it's a corporate board meeting, maybe it's a college campus session amongst your peers. When you are the only person in a room who believes what you do, you have an obligation now more than ever to stand up and say it. Say it with a spine. Say it with conviction. Say it with respect. But part of respect is that you respect your fellow Americans enough to tell them what you actually think. Not some sanitized, made up, publicly acceptable version of it. No. What you actually think. What your actual convictions are. And you know what? Fear has been infectious in this country. It has spread like an epidemic, 360 degrees faster than COVID-19, okay? That's the real virus that's spread in this country. But courage can be contagious too. It just requires more of us to step up and actually show it, like those 56 men did in 1776. That's what we're called on to do today, to stand up and speak the truth. Speak it with a spine without apology. The truth that God is real, that there are two genders, man and a woman. That fossil fuels are a requirement for human prosperity, and we're not going to apologize for it. That reverse racism is racism. That an open border is not a border. That parents determine the education of their children. That the nuclear family isn't a bad word. It is the greatest form of governance known to mankind. That capitalism is the best system we have to lift us up from poverty. That there are 3 branches of government in the United States, not 4. And that the U.S. Constitution is the strongest and greatest guarantor of freedom in human history. That is the truth. We fight for the truth. We stand up for the truth. That is what won us the American Revolution. That is what reunited us after the Civil War. That is what won us 2 world wars and the Cold War. That is what still gives hope to the free world. I told you I went to Rome last week, talked to European conservative leaders. They still look to us. Right? People think about where we are as a conservative movement. I say, you know what? We're not going to fork our money over next $200 billion to Ukraine. Tell me what the next $200 billion is going to do that the first $200 billion didn't do. Use that own money to protect our own borders in our own country here. And I said it here, and I said it there. But that's not just for America. It's not just for America. What hope does the rest of the free world have if the shining city on a hill no longer shines? It is our obligation to this country. It's our obligation to humanity. It's our obligation to posterity to make sure that we preserve that founding commitment of our country. The people we elect to run the government, and they owe a moral duty to the citizens of this country, not another one. You got to remember our history to be proud of it. And so I'll close with, I traveled this country for the last year talking a lot about how we need to teach our kids the history of this country, how our educational system shut down that Department of Education, give the money back to parents across this country who can choose where they send their kids to school, revive civic education. I'll tell you, I have a phone call to make this weekend. It's going to be the birthday of a young girl who I met in Iowa who was a 10-year-old at the time. She's turning 11 on Sunday. I plan to give her a call, although I hope this is not being live cast. It's supposed to be a surprise. But I'll tell you what I'm going to tell her is, so she was somebody who came up to me. I had one of my controversial policies that I rolled out. I got in a lot of trouble in the campaign. I don't know if you guys were paying attention. But one of the things that got me in trouble was a policy I rolled out which said that, you know what? Every high school senior, when they graduate from high school, should have to pass the same civics test that every immigrant has to pass before they become a legal voting citizen in this country. Got to know something about a country to be proud of it. And so anyway, it generated a lot of controversy. And this young girl, so at that point, it was a hot topic. And so she comes up to me. She's 10 years old. She approaches me after an event. It's like this one, big room, a lot of people. 10 years old, comes up to me with some printed documents. And she has a handwritten letter. I read the handwritten letter, and it tells me, I'm sorry that you were getting bullied because of this. I've been bullied at school, too. I said, well, we can handle it. But she says, she can handle it, too. She printed out the 100-question civics test. The way it works is, an immigrant who comes to this country, they pick 10 questions. You got to pass 6 out of the 10 questions. She printed out all 100 of them. She's 10 years old. She got 100 out of 100 for the civics test that a 10-year-old could pass. Every high school senior should be able to do it, too. We've stayed in touch, and we'll wish her a happy 11th birthday on Sunday. But you got to know something about the history. So I traveled this country talking about how important it is to teach our kids about the history of this country. And then I realized I'm wasting all this time making a mistake. We spend so much time talking about the importance of our history instead of just talking about our history. So I made a commitment every speech we're given now in the post-campaign period. I'll try to weave a story from our own history in so we can remember who we really are at a moment when we're teaching our kids that our country was founded in 1619 rather than 1776. That we are systemically racist because our founders were slave owners. Well, let's actually just fact-check that a little bit. Yes, some of them owned slaves. Thomas Jefferson's my favorite president. I'm not afraid to say that. He was the man who signed the Declaration of Independence, without whom we would have never had those ideals. And you know what? I would rather be a citizen of a nation that has ideals and falls short of them than a citizen of a nation that has no ideals at all. Note that they never call China hypocritical. To be hypocritical, you had to have ideals in the first place. So, yes, Thomas Jefferson was a slaveholder, but you know who wasn't? The guy who actually came before him, John Adams, the second president of the United States. At a moment when that was actually a very normal thing to do in the United States of America. He was a principled abolitionist, who on principle decided that he wasn't going to be a slave owner. The first non-founding father who became a president was actually John Adams's son, John Quincy Adams. Now, he has actually had a bright career beforehand. He served this country in many ways. But his presidency never was quite as successful as he wanted it to be. He went in, among other objectives, to abolish slavery. He never got close to achieving that or any of his other objectives. And it tortured him. It bothered him. He worked his entire life in the shadow of his father's legacy and our founding fathers. The first president elected who wasn't one of our founding fathers. Big shoes to fill. And for a number of reasons, his presidency just never achieved the goals that he thought it was going to. And so when he was voted out, he spent time to himself, thought he was going to be an author, tried to write books, started some civic institutions, didn't give him the level of satisfaction that he wanted. And so he went back to do, I'm looking at Congressman Perry now. I don't know if you're probably well aware of this. He came back and asked the public for a job application to have the job that you carry out today. He became a congressman. He was the only U.S. president in our history who went back to serve this country as a congressman after having been the U.S. president. It's an interesting time when he comes back to Congress. He comes back with one objective: to abolish slavery. When he's in Congress, they have back then what they call the gag rule. The gag rule was an interesting rule. It was actually demanded as a negotiation between Southern representatives and Northern representatives that said you could not use the word slavery on the Congress floor. That was the rule. The terms of debate were you couldn't use that rule. You couldn't utter that word. But here with John Quincy Adams, you got a guy, he's already been the president of the United States. He's got nothing to lose. He's going to serve this country. He said, you know what is the worst they're going to do? They're going to throw me out. I've been the president before. Slavery, 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 slavery. He says it on the Congress floor. He gets himself intentionally censured. And then he uses effectively what they had as a trial to potentially get himself kicked out of Congress. He uses that trial to make the case for abolition. I don't know what it is, a couple weeks, 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. Uses his own defense to actually make the case of what he felt he couldn't do as the U.S. president, but he went back to Congress to do anyway. And by the end of that trial, what do you know? They had gotten rid of the gag rule in Congress, so you could actually have the open debate they weren't allowed to have. Now, John Quincy Adams was a man who, you probably know this, Congressman Perry, but many people here may not. He died in the building where you work. He had a stroke in the middle of a speech. And we're going to see if he could survive. They kept him alive for 2 more days in one of the congressional anteroom chambers, but that was the hall where he died. He went back to Congress to serve, spoke literally till the moment he had a stroke, and then died in the building where he went back to serve his country. And they had to ask the other congressman who was willing to lead his funeral rites and carrying him out of that building. And the first person to raise his hand to do it was a little-known first-term congressman from Illinois by the name of Abraham Lincoln. See, these are the stories of American history. These are the stories of our founding through our Civil War that reunited this country and got us to where we are. And so I'll say what I said before. We will not be part of the generation that squanders what our founding fathers began. We don't have to be anymore this nation in decline that we've become. We don't have to be at the end of the ancient Roman Empire, as we're taught to believe. I think the truth is, as a nation, like some of you back there, our nation is really still a little young, actually. Going through our own version of our adolescence. That's what I see. Figuring out who we're going to be when we grow up. And when you view it that way, it makes sense again, right? You go through your adolescence, you go through that identity crisis. You lose your way a little bit. You do some stupid things. I did, certainly. Most of us probably did. But we are stronger for it when we get to our adulthood on the other side. And so, no, I don't think we have to be that nation in decline. I think we still can be, and this may be the last time I'm going to be here in election year able to tell you this, but I think we still in this moment can be a nation in our ascent. I'm not a fake optimist. I'm not going to walk in here and tell you that it's morning in America right now, because it is not. But it can be. I'm not going to tell you the American dream is alive and well. I know that's what I'm supposed to say. I can't tell you that. It's alive and hanging on for life support. But it can be. So what I'm asking you all to do is to do your part in this state that could decide not only a national election, not only who the next president of the United States is, but the fate of a nation that posterity deserves to preserve. And if you all do your part, I promise you I'll do mine. I promise you Donald Trump will do his. I promise you Congressman Perry will do his. Dinesh D'Souza will do his. Maria, you're going to do yours. We were with you earlier. I promise you, if we all do our part, then yes, we don't have to be, not in some cheesy politician way, this nation in decline, but still a nation whose best days can still be ahead of us. A nation where we will still look our kids in the eye and mean it. Not looking the other way. Kids know when you're lying to them. Actually mean it when we tell them the United States of America is still the nation where no matter who you are, or where your parents came from, or what your skin color is, that you can achieve anything you ever want with your own hard work, your own commitment, your own dedication, and that you know what? You are free to speak your mind at every step of the way. That is the American dream. That is what we are running to. And that is what we will revive to save this great nation. Thank you all. God bless you and your families, and may God bless our United States of America. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you. Thank you, Dinesh.